We have other news this morning, starting with the devastating storms that are now blamed for at least 33 deaths across the South. Dozens of reported tornadoes left a path of destruction in several states on Sunday and Monday. The deaths included at least 11 people in Mississippi, 9 in South Carolina, and 8 in Georgia. Jesse Mitchell is in Hampton County, South Carolina. That's about 90 miles west of Charleston. Jesse, good morning to you. I can't imagine worse timing, dealing with a deadly pandemic and now these storms. What is happening there?
Good morning, Gail. The pile of rubble behind me was a home just days ago, but as the storm blew through, you can see the destruction. Cars are mangled in the trees back there, and across the street, the rest of the house blown away. And this is in the town of Estill. One example of how the people of this state and others are being forced to put their lives back together again. The spring storms were unrelenting in their march across the region, literally uprooting some communities here in South Carolina.
All I heard was a crack, and then the house shook really badly.
10-year-old Charity Woods was trapped by a tree that crashed into her room as she slept. Her father struggled to get her free.
Right through there, I don't understand how we got out of there.
Governors in several affected states are concerned about recovering from these storms amid the coronavirus pandemic.
And many of those Georgians are already suffering from being out of work due to the COVID-19 virus, and now they have literally lost everything that they own.
In Georgia, where more than 400 people have died from the coronavirus, tornadoes added to the death toll as they tore across the state, shredding through buildings like Emma and Charles Pritchett's home of several decades.
It's a shambles. We can't even get in the living room.
Amanda Pace says she nearly lost her mom and stepdad. Their mobile home in Chatsworth, Georgia, was destroyed by a tornado Sunday.
I don't know how she made it out. Like I said, God's the only reason that she made it out alive.
In Mississippi, nearly a dozen people were killed by the storms, among them Lawrence County Sheriff's Deputy Robert Ainsworth and his wife Paula, a former Justice Court deputy clerk.
They're just both really fine people, come from really good families, and they're going to be missed by all.
And the sheriff's deputy who died is being remembered as a hero today. He was a Marine Corps veteran and a longtime employee. His department says he died shielding his wife from the tornado. Tony.
Communities are lending a hand after storms left many neighborhoods destroyed. 7 News' chief photographer Jason Parker has the story of how one church is building relationships by serving.
And the air was twirling and moving pretty fast, and the sound of the train came. Woke up with the bed shaking and the house shaking. The whole house was shaking. And I ran to the window and saw things flying through the air even though there was no light. We were asleep. We did not know that the tornado was coming. If there was a warning, we didn't get it.
The devastation, the destruction here is similar to what we've seen in Florida, where hurricanes came through, out in Alabama, where we've been out to tornadoes. It certainly is on the scale of what we've seen in other places, and the needs are great. We're grateful that we could be here and organized in order to go and help. Being able to come out and just help them clean up a tree, clean up their yard, be there with a group that just shows, hey, there's people in this community that care and want to be here. We may not know you, but we'll know you now, and we want you to know that the people in your community care about you and want to help and support you when things happen.
It's been a shock, and after a couple of days of wandering around not knowing what to do, you know, everybody's been real nice to help.
They're in a hard place, and so you just want to be kind and you want to talk to them. Even if I can't understand what they're going through, I can be there and help in any way I can. And this is a way to do that.
It's flattened. This was a large 2-story structure shaped like a barn, so we called it the barn. It was just a picture of disbelief, really. You just can't imagine how traumatic it was. It has been so nice that people have been willing to help, and we couldn't do it without them, really.
Tremors have been felt along the North Queensland coast after a 4.8 magnitude earthquake struck near the town of Bowen. Geoscience Australia recorded people as far as Townsville reporting tremors. Shortly after the incident, the Bureau of Meteorology reported that no tsunami threat is in effect to Australia.
Отходи от сосны.
Але те, що це навмисний підпал, це 100%. І він має кваліфікуватися зовсім не як пожежа. Це в селі пожежа, звичайно, де згоряє теж природа. А тут це вже терористичний акт. Він знищив дуже багато туристичних локацій. Локації, які приваблюють людей зі всього світу, ось зараз їх не можна відновити.
Це результат бездіяльності 5 років, я вам скажу, мінімум. Просіки не були вирубані, санітарні рубки не проводились, мінералізованих смуг немає. Тобто виникали такі ситуації, коли ми бачимо, де пожежа, але під'їхати техніки туди нереально, немає ні під'їзних путів, нічого.
Tremors have been felt along the North Queensland coast after a 4.8 magnitude earthquake struck near the town of Bowen. Geoscience Australia recorded people as far as Townsville reporting tremors. Shortly after the incident, the Bureau of Meteorology reported that no tsunami threat is in effect to Australia.
Firefighters battled forest fires in the Chernobyl exclusion zone on Saturday. The Ukrainian Ministry of Emergencies reported dozens of acres had been burnt, and authorities said radiation in the epicentre of the fire exceeds the norm. The fires were near the Chernobyl nuclear power station, which exploded in April 1986, causing the world's worst nuclear accident. Following the explosion, people were evacuated and resettled away from the 19-mile exclusion zone around the plant. That area is still strictly controlled. The blazes began on April 3rd in the western part of the zone before spreading to nearby forests, some of which are in the area of the zone that still has higher radiation. Hundreds of firefighters and hardware have been introduced to the region, including helicopters and airplanes.
Heavy winds and waves have been hitting the Lakeshore hard this afternoon. News 8 Lakeshore reporter Whitney Burney spoke to city leaders about the way they're pushing back against erosion.
The high winds have been creating these huge waves that are washing up against the dunes here near Grand Haven. The city says they stand to lose 10 to 20 feet of beach. All day, Heavy wind and waves have battered the lakeshore. Waves pushing up against docks at the Grand Haven Marina and crashing over piers at the city beach.
When we do get big storms, like you say, we're always, on full alert. We've, worry about things like power outages and things like that. But with these higher water levels, when those big winds come in, it kind of pushes a surge towards the coast here, and it's like a big bathtub leaning over.
To prepare, the city deployed hundreds of sandbags, giving them to private property owners and placing them around city infrastructure in flood zones. Even still, there's only so much they can do.
We expect today we might lose, 10 or 20 feet more dune. We're hopeful that it won't get too far up, and we're hopeful that it won't threaten any local residences, but there's not a lot we can do if it does come up.
Just south of the city, some homeowners aren't as lucky. The city of Grand Haven says they had several projects in the works to combat the issue, but due to COVID-19, things are on hold. Now they're hoping to hold off Mother Nature in the meantime.
Our community's sort of built to withstand being near the water naturally, but now these historically high levels, we're at a point now, highest recorded in history, so we're not quite used to where we're at now.
In Grand Haven, Whitney Burney, News 8.
Overseas, where several European countries are taking the first steps towards getting back to business, but at the same time, some are seeing an alarming spike in cases. ABC's Julia McFarland on lessons we might learn from there.
Europe's outbreak tonight behaving like a forest fire, re-flaring in places where the spread was considered under control. Germany just went through a fourth day of a spike, adding more than 3,000 new cases. That's as the country gets set to open some schools the first week of May. Milan, Italy also faces an infection rate 30% higher than the rest of Italy's rate nationwide, even as the nation's daily death rate fell below 500. Preparing for more mobility, Italy is developing a phone app to track people positive for the virus. Denmark is among nations taking gradual steps, allowing the reopening of hair salons, tattoo parlors, and driving schools. Tonight, concerns about reinfection in South Korea, whose efforts to suppress the virus were considered the gold standard. The number of people apparently infected for a second time now numbers more than 100. Tom, here in the UK, Brits are largely obeying the lockdown without much pushback. It's not scheduled to end until May. This, as the government warns, we have not yet passed the peak. Tom?
Julia McFarland reporting from her home.
Over these last few weeks, stay-at-home orders have turned America's densest and most vibrant cities into virtual ghost towns. But for one well-known photojournalist here in New York, the shutdown created a unique chance to document the city that never sleeps, as it's never been seen before. Brooke Silva Braga met him on the runway.
By his own count, George Steinmetz has climbed into a helicopter to photograph New York 40 times.
For New York City, a helicopter is really the ultimate tool.
His 2015 book, New York Air, captured the color, energy, and scope of America's biggest city, from sunbathers in Central Park to taxis crowding the avenues. What do you expect today?
I expect to see a city change. I think we'll see subtle differences, but when you go up in the air, you just find things. That's part of the fun of it.
His discoveries in the air have made Steinmetz one of the world's best-known aerial photographers. His fifth book, The Human Planet, is out this month. But most times he doesn't work from a helicopter. George's interest in the world's most remote places spurred the creation of the world's lightest flying machine, a motorized paraglider.
I wanted to do some flying in the Sahara, and there were no aircraft to hire out there. I had to bring my own, and I had to have something that didn't use an airfield. It let me get aerial photos in places that had never been seen from the air before.
But paragliders are not practical or legal in New York. So this past Tuesday, Steinmetz and pilot Nate Lovett took an open-air chopper on a once unthinkable path to the city.
Oh, this is rare. They don't usually let you go fly right over to the LaGuardia Airport, I'll tell you that.
Passing over LaGuardia, Steinmetz snapped the tarmac, all but deserted.
Wow, that's we're over top of LaGuardia. Not a single plane.
What's even
going
weirder
anywhere.
is looking at the gates and they're all empty.
Yeah.
Crossing into Midtown Manhattan, they circled over Rockefeller Plaza.
You want to go over top of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to recreate that shot we had. So maybe if you go the way you are and then you can cut
right and then left?
In 2014, George had captured this image of a crowded observatory and ice skaters 800 feet below.
When it's full of people, it's alive. It's like this, all these little ants on top, but there were no ants today. And then you look down below Rockefeller Center, and like, you know, the ice rink and all that stuff is just total dead zone. It looks like a construction site. When I worked on my book, I was trying to photograph the life of the city. And that was what was really interesting, is how the humans were involved in the city and their spatial relationships and where they were and where they weren't. But today, there's nobody there.
6 years ago, moviegoers blanketed Bryant Park. This week, it was as vacant as the stretch of 6th Avenue beside it. The bustling rooftop restaurant on 5th Avenue, now a place to stack chairs and benches until something changes. And the famous snarled traffic of the Lincoln Tunnel. Steinmetz captured the crawl between New York and New Jersey back in 2014, and then again Tuesday at 6:45 p.m., usually rush hour.
Just aesthetically, as a photographer, was it more beautiful to shoot, less beautiful?
It's kind of spooky. I mean, I'm not superstitious or anything, but it's just kind of like, it's kind of like a haunted city. Yeah, I feel like you're like in a futuristic movie where everybody left. It's very odd.
You want to go over there?
Yeah, and then look down, and then we should move on. It's not a very good picture, to be honest.
It's kind of depressing, to be honest. It's just like the city, it's such a vital, you know, thriving city, and it just looks very, just kind of turned in itself. It's in paralysis.
With so much missing, Steinmetz looked for what had been added.
Got to go forward here, more to the left.
A cluster of white hospital tents dotting the green of Central Park. It's run by the evangelical group Samaritan's Purse. They more often work in war zones. And on the Hudson River, the Comfort, the Navy hospital ship with 1,000 beds and just a few dozen patients. George circled around it time and time again.
You're circling, circle, circle, circle. After the third or fourth circle, what were you like, okay, one more circle, and this is what I hope to see?
When you get the right picture book, it's like you get like what Friedman calls like a fogasm. You get this kind of retina brain shock. It's like, ooh, you see something.
This is it.
Yeah, you see it, and it's just like you get that. And I felt that I was close to that.
Got to go forward here, more to the left.
Helicopter, they don't like to hover. People think they hover, but they always like to keep moving. They're smoother if they keep moving. So you kind of do a pass, and it's, want to be a little further, a little left, a little right, a little up, down. And it's always each.
Americans are marching through the streets in their thousands, demanding the lockdown be lifted, and the president is in their corner. Despite 700,000 infections, Donald Trump is calling for some states to be liberated, including Michigan, which has the 4th highest number of cases in the country.
From Florida to California, in Idaho and Michigan, protesters line the streets shoulder to shoulder to demonstrate against stay-at-home orders.
We want to go back to work.
Go to the hairdressers, get our hair done. It's time to open up.
All with the blessing of the president.
They seem to be very responsible people to me.
Donald Trump acknowledging many are his supporters and is fueling demonstrations with calls to liberate states like Corona hotspot Michigan, Minnesota, and in Virginia, also referencing gun rights.
They want to take their guns away, okay? They want to take their guns away. That's the Second Amendment.
Governors hitting back.
This is just grossly irresponsible, and it is dangerously bombastic.
The president isn't concerned about protesters spreading COVID-19.
They're congregating in ways that health experts have said they should not.
No, these are people expressing their views. I see where they are and I see the way they're working.
The death toll in the US is still growing, with additional probable corona deaths now also being added.
And I think right now we're heading at probably around 60, maybe 65,000.
Cases also rising. One mother without symptoms unknowingly infecting 17 of her 18 children in New York. Meanwhile, some governors are pushing back against Trump's reopening plan, saying they don't have enough tests to do it safely. Trump firing back on Twitter, saying the states need to step up and telling the New York governor to spend more time doing and less time complaining.
The coronavirus is one of the biggest threats to U.S. national security. With the number of cases in the U.S. growing larger than China or Italy, the government is taking drastic measures to fight the disease.
I want to assure the American people that we're doing everything we can each day to confront and ultimately defeat this horrible, invisible enemy. We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war.
President Trump activated the National Guard in California, New York, and Washington to help combat the spread of the virus.
And I want to thank our National Guard. Now, you did such a good job that I'm asking for 4 more from the president.
The administration emphasized that activating the National Guard is not an indication of a plan to move toward martial law.
Martial law is a very specific state of affairs and a very dire state of affairs where the military has taken over all the functions of civil government.
It's like we were in an army camp. We were at war in an army camp.
People's rights should be protected alongside their health and safety.
Some fear coronavirus may be used as an excuse to limit civil liberties in America. Others say the declaration of martial law would be ineffective in combating the disease and an abuse of power. So, how likely is it that martial law will be declared in the U.S. in response to the coronavirus outbreak? Martial law is commonly understood as when the military, and not the judicial system, acts as the supreme power, and armed forces control all aspects of government.
Martial law is a very extreme measure, very unusual measure, which is essentially the replacement of civilian government by military government.
When you bring the military out into a situation of martial law, what you're ultimately saying is we're no longer going to be patient with people's civil rights. We're no longer going to be patient with people's needs and excuses for why they may have to do something that the military doesn't want them to do. The military is ultimately designed to impose will by force. That's what the military is there for.
Martial law occurs only in dire circumstances, where either the local government is no longer able to control a situation or in instances of attacks.
Our system is structured to safeguard the separation between civilian and military government. That is codified in something called the Posse Comitatus Act, which explicitly prohibits the use of federal military forces to execute the law.
While martial law is distinct from the suspension of habeas corpus, the two may happen in tandem when martial law forces courts to close. Habeas corpus is Latin for that you have the body. A writ of habeas corpus means that a prisoner or other detainee must be brought before the court to determine if the person's imprisonment or detention is lawful.
The strict form of martial law that the Supreme Court has required in order to suspend habeas corpus has only come when the courts in fact are closed. And if the courts are open, then you don't have essentially martial law proper. And therefore, you still have the right to habeas corpus to go to those open courts and say, I'm being held unlawfully, I'm being held without charge, etc.
Suspension of habeas corpus, which is extreme and has been an abuse, historic abuse, is really not what is happening now. And our Constitution safeguards against that. If there were any incredibly unlikely abuse of that kind of power, there would be challenges.
Following the over 3-year use of martial law in Hawaii, the Supreme Court's 1946 decision upheld a Civil War case that declared martial law is only constitutional when an emergency forces courts to close.
You can suspend habeas corpus under the Constitution in situations of insurrection or invasion. And so in situations of insurrection or invasion, it often is the case that the courts won't be open, the police won't be able to do their jobs, trash won't be able to be picked up in the ordinary way. So martial law might be necessary. And if martial law is necessary, it may very well be that habeas corpus gets suspended.
While enforcing a quarantine or social distancing orders during the coronavirus outbreak may feel like an infringement on civil liberties, it does not negate the presence of a judicial system and therefore does not suspend habeas corpus.
The social distancing that's being imposed in places like New York City and around the country right now would be much stricter, and your ability to violate those kinds of curfews would probably be much more curtailed if they were being enforced by soldiers.
In fact, advances in technology like video chat allow courts to stay open during isolation and quarantine.
a judge could sit across from them just like you and I are sitting right now and actually hear that case. And so there may not actually be a legitimate reason to suspend habeas corpus. And I'll give you one example of how that's actually played out in practice. Detainees in Guantanamo have habeas corpus here. They have been using this kind of video teleconference that we're all now growing accustomed to for about the past 15 years. I think advances in technology probably make the need to suspend habeas corpus far less than it ever was, when you literally had to go out and literally carry the body into a courtroom that was open. But it also may challenge the basic rules the courts have laid out in habeas corpus cases to understanding when we're in martial law and when martial law is actually truly justified. At the federal level, the power of the president to essentially declare martial law in parts of the country has traditionally only been authorized or approved by the courts where the state government is unwilling or unable to essentially enforce federal law.
People often talk about activating the National Guard as a sign martial law may be declared. Activating the National Guard does not mean that martial law is being enforced. It does mean that the local or state government may need extra assistance from the federal government.
Activation of the National Guard is not inherently martial law. In fact, what the law permits is the use of state National Guards under civilian control, which is the governors, in order to carry out emergency humanitarian assistance functions.
As of early April 2020, over 30,000 Air and Army National Guard members have been supporting coronavirus response efforts at the direction of their governors. They have helped build an
Over the years, Pope Francis has explained through words and gestures that the mission of the Church is to reveal God's mercy. He said it in his first Angelus a few days after his election as Pope.
Ci comprende, ci attende, non si stanca di perdonarci se sappiamo tornare a Lui con il cuore contrito. Non dimenticate questo, il Signore mai si stanca di perdonare. Siamo noi che ci stanchiamo di chiedere il perdono.
Pope Francis is the first pope to go to confession in public. He's also heard the confessions of many people, both in Rome and during his papal trips. In 2015, he called for a jubilee with a special focus on God's mercy.
Sono convinto che tutta la Chiesa potrà trovare in questo giubileo la gioia per riscoprire e rendere feconda la misericordia di Dio con la quale tutti siamo chiamati a dare consolazione ad ogni uomo e ad ogni donna del nostro tempo.
The Pope explains that God's mercy doesn't remove the weight of sin, but rather, through confession, allows for the healing of the wounds caused by sin.
La misericordia fa la stessa cosa con noi. Non ci dipinge dall'esterno una faccia di buoni. Non ci fa il Photoshop, ma con i medesimi figli delle nostre miserie, con quelli, e dei nostri peccati, con quelli, intessuti con amore di Padre, ci tesse in modo tale che la nostra anima si rinnova recuperando la sua immagine, quella di Gesù.
In Poland, during a trip dedicated to John Paul II and to the devotion of the Divine Mercy, the Pope explained that God's forgiveness helps people pardon and be compassionate toward others.
Siete capaci di sognare? E quando il cuore è aperto e capace di sognare, c'è posto per la misericordia, c'è posto per carezzare quelli che soffrono, c'è posto per mettersi accanto a quelli che non hanno pace nel cuore o gli manca il necessario per vivere.
Pope Francis says receiving God's forgiveness also means pardoning those who've hurt us and not fostering resentment.
Dio perde la memoria delle storie brutte di tanti peccatori, dei nostri peccati, ci perdona e va avanti. Ma ci chiede soltanto fa lo stesso, impara a perdonare, non portare avanti questa croce non feconda dell'odio, del rancore, di me la pagherai.
The other face of mercy is charity. The Pope's gestures toward people in need have helped many experience the goodness of God.